If we didn't deliver tax reduction, yes, I would resign, because we are making a commitment to the New Zealand people and we intend to keep it.
For Christopher Luxon, it's a moot point.
You can state your job on it.
Can we just let's take one at a time. So what we're saying very clearly is that I'm deeply committed to delivering tax relief for New Zealanders.
In a vacuum of information, just how National can do that is up for debate.
You were a vociferous critic of Grant Robertson's economic management. In his 6 years as Finance Minister, how many of Grant Robertson's budget deficits were greater than yours? You didn't answer my question there. So in 6 years as Finance Minister, how many of Grant Robertson's budget deficits were greater than yours?
I don't have an answer to your question, Jack.
I think it's either 0 or 1, depending on how you treat COVID.
Right.
All things being equal, if every other revenue and spending line in the budget remained the same, but you didn't introduce tax cuts, would you require more or less borrowing?
The borrowing would be the same, because our tax reduction package has been fully offset with savings from elsewhere, that is money that would otherwise have been sent.
That's right, though, right? If all things being equal, if you did choose to bank those cuts as opposed to introducing tax cuts, you would be borrowing less, right?
I'm just determined to live in the real world, not your hypothetical world.
And we're just sort of gun at your head. There's no barrier. There's nothing that actually stopped you from choosing to bank those savings as opposed to redistributing them via tax cuts.
There
I mean,
there is. I'll tell you what
choices.
it was.
Yeah.
I looked a lot of people in the eye during the election campaign, Jack, and I said, tax relief is coming.
Exactly.
We're going to help you.
So
and
it was a choice.
So
it was a choice. Yeah, that's the point. So it was a choice. And in order to follow through with your promises throughout the campaign, you're borrowing $12 billion on top of the borrowing in debt that was already forecast while announcing those tax cuts.
But that's not as a consequence of tax relief, Jack. I think it's really important that people listening to this know I don't accept.
$12 billion on, I'll get to you. You can answer this in a second.
I'm not going to accept that point. I'm not going to let it go. So let me
hang on. You don't accept that you're borrowing $12 billion on top of what was already forecast?
Not as a consequence of tax relief, which is the way that you've put it.
No, I've said you are borrowing $12 billion on top of the borrowing and debt that was already forecast while announcing your government's plans.
Like the promises, the coalition government is spending more than it pledged. That's the takeaway after the government's books were opened. The Finance Minister admitted it's sobering reading. The books remain in the red, with the country's deficit now almost $13 billion. Revenue is up, but it's not enough to close the gap. Debt has gone up by nearly $20 billion to $175 billion, taking it to 42.5% of GDP. The government says the figures justify the cuts it's made, but as business correspondent Katie Bradford reports, those affected by the cuts disagree.
In Porirua and in Warkworth, groups that help the most vulnerable are reeling after learning their Oranga Tamariki funding will be slashed.
Very surprised and very disappointed. People come to the parenting course because they want to. They want to become better parents, and we've even got grandparents who are parenting their grandchild or children.
A lot of the work we're doing is preventative mental health work and even moderate mental health work. And the rug's been pulled out from under all of those people.
So we need to impose restraint to ensure that the government and the country is living within its means.
Unemployment is expected to keep rising, the Finance Minister admitting that could hurt the government's future tax take and increase welfare costs.
You have asked government departments to make cuts that have led to some of those job losses. Therefore, some of that extra money that will cost the system does come down to your decisions.
No, I don't accept that, because there's two things going on there. The first is no government can continue to live beyond its means indefinitely. And the second is that what we're concerned about is the number of jobs and the economy as a whole.
Labor says it shows the coalition's tax cuts were unaffordable.
New Zealanders will continue to pay the price for those tax cuts well into the future, and it means that New Zealanders should be bracing for more public sector cuts, more public service cuts.
Nicola Willis says it's all about priorities.
If you cut the funds to organisations working with our most vulnerable people in our communities, it's a weird thing to do.
It's hard to see any rationale.
The government says it's the plan it promised and the plan it's sticking to.